We have Khansa playing basketball and shooting a three-pointer.
No way.
And mini golf.
And playing mini golf.
I want people to understand the pain, the literal blood, sweat and tears that go into it.
My last film took 14 years to make. By the time I was done, I had serious carpal tunnel syndrome. I think intrinsically the story is an amazing one, right? Brilliant musician, came from Faisalabad, who had no international exposure, barely spoke English. But he cut right through, made it to mainstream Hollywood.
So I'm so excited because today on the podcast, we have two people who I have enjoyed so much talking to about the subject that we're going to be discussing today that I had to have them on. And I hope that you stick around and you listen to the entire thing through, because we talk about a documentary, we talk about an album launch, we're talking about everything. Let me just first introduce the people that we have on the pod today. We've got Saina Bashir, who is a photojournalist who has worked for New York Times, who has worked for the Wall Street Journal, who has worked for Washington Post and National Geographic. She's a photojournalist, but this is the first time that she's dived into filmmaking. With her, we've got Zakir Thawer, who you might know from his previous documentary on Dr. Salam that has won 6 international documentary awards and has been on Netflix since 2019. Between the two of them, they've managed to do something really, really cool. So without further ado, let's jump into it. I heard you were a physicist.
No. So I have a bachelor's degree in physics. I don't think I qualify as a physicist.
Of course it does. But for the sake of this podcast, filmmakers behind the documentary that you guys are working on Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan called Ustad. Let's dive right into it. I wanted to ask you guys, what was the origin story behind what happened? How did this fall into your lap? How did you, is it something that you started and you woke up one day and you were like, okay, this is what I want to do. And this is what I'm going to do, dedicate the next so many years of my life to?
So it was a group of us at Haveli Barood Khana in Lahore. And I remember it was winter and we were sitting around a bonfire and Khan Saab's qawwalis were playing in the background. They have this surround system out in the courtyard. And we just started talking about him, and everybody had stories. Everybody had anecdotes that, he would just enter the Haveli. He would just sit where a lot of qawwals now perform, and he would just start jamming. He would just start singing. He was friends with the Mali. He was friends with everyone at the Haveli. He was very close to Yusuf Salahuddin. And we just started talking about the impact he had, he was a global phenomena, how he died so young. And that's where the conversation started from. And I said to everyone, I just realized that I haven't seen a definitive documentary or film. And I found it really surprising that I haven't seen it. I haven't seen anything like that.
There's bits and pieces everywhere.
There are bits and pieces. There were two documentaries that were done in the early 90s. One of them was released shortly after he had passed away. The filmmaker was still filming while Khan Saab passed away, and one of them was his French production company called Morgan Productions that did a documentary on him, and the other one was by an Italian filmmaker, Giuseppe. He was actually in our teaser that you saw at the screening as well. And these two were well done, but they weren't sort of, I wouldn't call them definitive. They were a great effort. These filmmakers followed him around. They came to Pakistan with him. But it sort of lacks the impact that he had and the kind of musicians who wanted to collaborate with him, the kind of success he had in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I thought that a lot of that was missing in those documentaries. And so that's where the idea started from. And I, as a storyteller, I'm always thinking of ideas. And after that conversation, I just realized that, this is something I want to work on.
Right.
And that's where it all started from. Our
generation really, we heard a lot of him. I can't say the same for the newer generations, mostly because of the lack of that. I feel like qawwali generally as a genre the people who love it really love it. And then there are people who just don't care for it. We were part of the generation that kind of had the best of both.
So, you know, it's really interesting that's exactly what I also thought, right? That our generation is probably the last generation who grew up with his music. And maybe when we were really little, we also were at his concerts, you know. But you'd be surprised because we've seen Spotify statistics, and it's actually the largest audience of Khan Saab is between the age of 18 and 25.
Wow.
And that's so interesting. Right?
Yeah. I mean, this is brand new information for me too.
Yeah. And, you know, Spotify does great like data analytics, and they really like look into their artists who are listening to their music. And they've done this research, and these numbers were like just...
And these are like global numbers, or is it... Wow. Okay.
South Asia, but also South Asia mostly.
Yeah.
But even then, you know, 18 to 25 were born after he passed away.
Yes, much after. Yeah. True. Okay, so let's explain to them what is it exactly that you guys are working on, because you're working on the documentary, but then there's also an album launch happening simultaneously. So like, when it started, you came up with the idea and stuff, and then how did the two of you meet?
So I started talking to a few friends about the fact that I wanted to make a documentary. And I don't come from the documentary or filmmaking world. I was, you know, doing my photojournalism work. I was working on photo essays, and I had just recently moved back to Pakistan from the States. So I used to work there as a staff photographer for a newspaper. And so this was my first time wanting to make a documentary. And I started speaking with people who were from that space. And Ziad, a really good friend of both mine and Zakir's, Ziad Zafar, I spoke to him and I said, you know, I have this idea that I want to make a documentary, and I think I want it to be on Netflix or a major platform. And that's just that was the idea from the beginning, that I don't want to just make a documentary. I want to make a documentary which is, you know, that level of production and that level of research, so that the whole world gets to see it. And Ziad then put me in touch with Zakir, and he said, oh, you should speak to Zakir, because Zakir's film on Abdul Salam was already on Netflix at the time.
Yes.
And that's how Zakir and I started talking. And it was quite motivating when I called him, who's like a seasoned filmmaker, and I said, I want to make a documentary about Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. And he said, it's a brilliant idea. I think that gave me a lot of confidence and a lot of like courage to embark on this journey. Because everyone that I discussed the idea with just said, this is such a good idea. You should totally do this, you know? So that was really...
Absolutely. I'm surprised that it's been 2 decades and no one's actually jumped up and said, okay, you know what? We want to do something on this scale, on this level, or just give that kind of a legend, that kind of a voice, or to show it. I'm surprised that hasn't happened as yet.
Zakir, don't you think it's happened though? People have tried, I guess. People have tried to do this.
So I served as an advisor to Saina for about 2 years, I think, or a year and a half. After which she sort of pulled me in.
Yeah.
And I was somewhat reluctant because it's a Herculean undertaking. Making a documentary is a trial by fire. Also, they've now become an art form. Back in the 90s, documentaries would have voiceovers. They wouldn't really need archives.
Yeah.
But then HBO and then Netflix took it to a whole new level. They became these cinematic pieces of art.
That's true.
And so that was, exactly her vision, right? A grand cinematic documentary on Khan Saab is what she wanted to make. I was also moved by the audacity of the vision, right? You just want to make you just don't want to make a documentary. You want to make a theatrical, incredible documentary on Khan Saab.
Go big or go home.
That does justice to his legacy.
Absolutely.
Also, it should be grand enough to be appreciated and seen on a global stage, because he was a global icon. So, yeah, what were you saying? Has it been done before?
No, I was just saying that I feel like it's been 2-3 decades where we haven't given our legends that kind of, like you're saying, that cinematic value. Other people come from abroad. They come with their cameras and they come with their with their equipment and everything, and they give a spotlight to our legends. Whereas a lot of people here haven't really thought it through and haven't thought, or even if they have the idea, they don't go ahead with it.
It's daunting.
It is.
We were saying this at our screenings, right? In the teaser, there's a Hall montage where we picked the best instances of Hall from 800 hours of archive.
Oh.
Now that takes a lot. All of our archives are beautifully catalogued. That's not easy to do. You're trying to resurrect a dead man, right? You need to rely heavily on photos, archives, research. Not everyone has the wherewithal to take on. I'm not tooting our own horn. I'm just saying we're fully cognizant of what the process entails, and we're willing to give it just that.
I think also it's about context, and a lot of people in the West have tried to make documentaries. While we have been working on Ustad, we found out that there was another production company based out of LA who wanted to make exactly the same kind of documentary, a biopic that we were making, and at some point they did give up, because you know what, it had to be done by someone from here who had the context and the connections. It's very important. The way you can tell stories from your backyard.
Absolutely.
An outsider can't do it.
The thing is, you also have to, with a documentary, and and a subject like Nusrat, you are picking someone who's so complex, and so there's just so much behind it. But also you have to tell a story about the humanity of it all in order to connect with the audiences, which anyone from outside, unless they're from here, they know exactly what he went through or where he's from. Like we say, oh yeah, he's from Faisalabad or whatever. We know exactly where that is. We know the background. We know all of that. Someone coming from outside, for them, it's just another city. It's just another point on the map. So it's a very different, which is why I was surprised that no one has actually gone ahead. And so one of the things that the first time we met, you came here looking for archives, and then you spent a number of hours in this building looking for archives. I want to actually, just so that everyone understands how big the task is of putting together something like this, the kind of stuff that's gone into the making of. I wanted to talk a little bit about that so that people understand how many years has it been since you've been working on this?
3 years.
3 years, okay. And how much time in those 3 years have you guys spent running after people, running after archives, and how easy and how difficult has it been?
3 years.
3 years. Oh, it's extremely difficult. Sadly, there's no tradition of preserving archives in our part of the world.
We discussed this and we were all collectively saddened by it.
Right. And I make it a point to say this about PTV. They have arguably the best repository of archives on Khansab. But if you ask them for it, they'll just give you what's digitized already. In many cases, they don't have the equipment that they need to digitize material. And they're sitting on just incredible stuff on Khansab. We know this because we've seen some of the stuff that's gotten into people's hands somehow. But even otherwise, any time one sees a camera in a piece of archive showing another camera, it becomes apparent that there's more than one cameraman. And so then what you end up with is this obsession with trying to find where the footage from the other camera is.
Yeah.
So for example, we have Resham holding up a camera, recording this event where Khan Saab, Noor Jahan, Javed Akhtar met. And so we're trying to chase that particular archive. So it's clues that lead to more clues. If you see National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, his father says disparagingly, there's, all that you'll end up with are clues that lead to more clues that lead to more clues. But we lucked out. So for example, there's a documentary on Jeff Buckley, made by the same company that made a documentary on Khan Saab. And that's how we discovered that Buckley was interviewed and had this incredible affection. I mean, we were aware of the fact that he had this affection for Khan Saab. We want to find an instance of him saying it to camera. And we chanced on it quite serendipitously, and then went on to find the raw interview, in which the person who's interviewing him says, oh, I also interviewed Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. And so then it became apparent that there was a Khan Saab interview, which we use in the teaser, which the teaser begins.
Yeah.
So it's insane amounts of work.
We got in touch with the estate as well.
We got in touch
with a lawyer who manages Jeff Buckley's estate and is directly in touch with his mother, because there were a lot of private archives that, of course, are not available online. So we had to go through them, and they were very kind to share their archives. We have his diary, notes from his diary, handwritten notes about what Khan Saab meant to him.
Wow.
And so, these are things that I think they also trusted us because we were from his part of the world. Sometimes you would think that, they're just from Pakistan, why should we get back to them? Kind of a thing. It happens in other cases. But for them, I think it meant a lot to them that we were also from his world.
Yeah.
And they also appreciated the reciprocity. So we had some stuff on Buckley they did not have, which we shared with them.
That's amazing.
So stuff like that they always like, right? You have something you can bring to the table also.
For me, this is like the coolest thing ever. Like to sit down and have this conversation with you guys, that like you're sharing stuff with their team, they're sharing back, and like to know this, because a lot of people don't they think, oh, documentary shoot ho rahi hai, they probably just landed up there with their camera and that's it's done. They don't understand the complexity.
Pearl Jam, we ended up giving Pearl Jam photos they did not have. So they didn't have photos of Eddie Vedder and Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan that we had.
Wow.
So we ended up giving them archives also.
That's been happening a lot. And a lot of times we get in touch with someone and they say, oh, are you in touch with his daughter? Because we have something we'd like to share with her. Right. And we've been passing things along to Nida and to the estate. Sorry, just one more thing about Jeff Buckley. We also got in touch with his really close friend. And they told us that at his funeral, there were two funerals. One was more public. Of course, because he was such a big figure. But also there was another one that was a private event, and the family played Khan Saab's music at the funeral, his favorite songs at the funeral.
Wow.
And we're trying to chase archives. We're trying to find if anybody filmed it, because of course it was a very private affair, but we're hoping that we find it somehow.
So we know there's also footage of Buckley and Khan Saab ordering Pakistani food at a restaurant. We're also chasing that.
I really hope you can find all of this for the sake of your document, because this would change a lot of people's perspectives.
We're on it like there's no tomorrow. There's a whole team of people dedicated to just this. But then what's interesting is we have Khan Saab playing basketball and shooting a 3-pointer.
No way.
And mini golf.
And playing mini golf.
That's amazing.
In LA.
When you chance upon stuff like that is when you have stuff that's never been seen before.
What is that feeling like? Like when you're sitting there and something just randomly pops up. Like this documentary also, the way it happened, we talked about this. It was a chance that there was there were these unreleased tracks that you kind of, while you were filming your documentary, they just happened to pop up.
Yes and no. So the archives don't really pop up. We really have to do our research, talk to the right people. Someone might mention that, oh, I remember he met Jeff Buckley and they were at a restaurant. And then we make it our life's mission to find that archive. So nothing has fallen into our laps that easily, to be honest. You know how we found the archives of him playing basketball. So we found this beautiful photo of him and Alia Khan on Twitter, and we responded to it, and we got in touch with her, and turns out that she was a family friend of his and spent a lot of time with him in LA, and her parents were friends with Khan Saab, and she sort of became his manager and translator as well. And so she would take him to a lot of meetings in Hollywood and would spend a lot of time with him. And she had these archives. So she wanted Khan Saab to experience things outside of music as well,
right?
During his time in LA. So she's the one who took him outside her house to play basketball with her brothers. She's the one who took him to mini golf. And, she also told us this great anecdote about Carlos Santana. So Carlos Santana was a huge fan of Khan Saab's. He invited them to his concert in LA, and they got the VIP treatment. They went to from the VIP entrance, and she's like, that's when I realized what it's like to be an A-list celebrity in Hollywood. So she was this young 17, 18-year-old with Khan Saab, and she said the kind of respect he got, the kind of people who wanted to, meet him. And then Carlos said, bring Khan Saab backstage. So they went into the green room, and Carlos was there, and he greeted Khan Saab and started saying things in poetry, not in actual words.
Yeah.
So he said something like, tell him he's the...
Your voice takes me to the moon and the stars and beyond. And she had to translate.
And she had to translate. And she's like, ये कह रहे हैं आप इनके चांद. She's like, I was lost. Yeah. I didn't know how to translate this. Yeah. But he was just,
Larger than life. That's amazing. And to be a part of that moment, I can't even imagine it. And you guys are now trying to capture it. So that's even cooler. Just 6 degrees of separation from that moment. That's something that's amazing. Tell me about the editing process, because that's, I think, the most important part. Because how do you choose? Because when you have all of this in front of you, how do you choose and how do you decide that, okay, this I want to keep, this is so good, I also want to keep, but I also have to make it a certain side? Because I was in that room when I was telling Zakir this as well, when you guys previewed the a little teaser for the documentary, and I was in that room, and every single person in that room was glued. And because I have to talk about it and I write about it, so I was looking around and I was looking at all these faces, and there was moments where somebody was smiling, someone was laughing, they enjoyed bits and pieces in there were emotions coming out. So, and I felt emotions as well. So just to put together a teaser like that, I know it must have driven you nuts, because I've done this much of editing in comparison to what you guys have done. What's it like?
It's painstaking. It's insane. We found a brilliant editor. Her name's Sorat Behan. Everyone pronounces it incorrectly. I try to do justice. Is Sorat Behan. Absolutely brilliant. But obviously, you begin by cataloging everything you have. Everything under the sun, every single photo, every single piece of archive. There are also incredible tools now that that auto-transcribe speech.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of AI worked in. So, you teach it to get Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan correctly. Mm-hmm. And it automatically gets it right everywhere else.
Right.
You identify the speaker in one place and it sort of gets it right everywhere else. So then there were printouts. So of everything, of every single word everyone said. And so she and I both went over the transcripts and we highlighted independently what worked for us. And there was a lot of convergence. We sort of converged on the same ideas. There was a lot of sifting through all the material. It's a painstaking process because you're watching hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, and then also choosing, you're like, all of it is brilliant. What do we choose to keep in? What do we choose to not? And then should we make a part 2?
Zakir's favorite line is, you have to kill your darlings.
You have to kill your darlings. There's the hardest. There were some things which we got, you get attached to stuff. And it's very difficult to then get rid of it in the interest of brevity.
Yeah, that's my problem.
That's the
keep it all
hardest
in.
thing to do. That's the hardest thing to do. Yeah, we were burning the midnight oil. So, for example, the editor would get done at around 3:30, after which he had to be dropped home. And the next day, rinse, repeat, the same thing, over again. So, yes, it's a very difficult process. Also, it's very interesting how you can simulate what you can get an audience to feel. I find that very interesting. It's like taking a aerial vantage point, and I think writers can do this too, right? You write, and then you sort of remove yourself and see it from an outsider's point of view, and then you get back into it. So it's a constant forest and trees kind of zooming in, zooming out.
Okay. Yeah, because I would imagine because you're spending so much time with the material, with it, that you're in it. And then everything becomes your baby. And then when you have to step back and be like, but will that person resonate with it? Will
Right.
that person? I mean, in order to tell a good story, you also have to kind of connect with all of those people.
And the brain tends to airbrush stuff, right? I mean, you can have instances of internal connection without it being apparent in the
Yeah.
material itself. So the editor also had certain ideas that didn't quite play out well enough, as did we all. But yes, how do you sort of extricate and deem something as this isn't working? It's not easy to do.
It's not. And generally, documentaries, people don't realize this. You have to tell a good story. So, what do you guys think is like the recipe for a good documentary?
I think intrinsically the story is an amazing one, right? Brilliant musician, made it to the global stage, came from Faisalabad, was surrounded by people who had no international exposure, barely
Right.
spoke English, but he cut right through, made it to mainstream Hollywood. And not only that, his music is featured not just anywhere in the films he did the score for, or he performed for. It's featured in the most important scenes.
Right.
So Dead Man Walking, very important scene. Last Temptation of Christ, very important scene. Natural Born Killers, very important scene.
To answer your question about what's a recipe for a good documentary, I think two things: persistence, because it's not easy.
Yeah.
There's no money in documentary filmmaking, so it has to be your passion project. And this is my first project, but even I would say, don't quit your day job. Make it a passion project.
Yeah.
And I think the second thing is being able to fundraise, being able to create an interest in that topic or in the project that you want to do. I think these are the two things that will help you succeed if you want to make a documentary.
By recipe, did you mean what ingredients at hand let you make a good story? The story is king.
Yes.
Or did you mean the mechanics of it?
Both. Because the thing is, a lot of people, I mean, I know for a fact, like even just my friends, they watch now. Yes, like you said, Netflix has kind of brought documentaries into people's homes. Before, it was a very small niche part of the population that was watching them and following them, and they were passionate about it. But mainstream, nobody cared about documentaries. They would think, oh yeah, boring. It's just interviews back to back, right? It's not like that anymore. There's reenactments. There's there's a lot that goes into it now. And now, because they brought it into the mainstream, but people still don't understand what it takes to go into making one, how long it takes, and what all you guys have to chase down, which is why this conversation is so important, so that I want people to understand what you guys have been through and what you're still going through, because it's not ready yet, right? It's going to be another year for it to be like fully cooked and ready to go. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, Netflix, I hope you're listening. You guys pick it up and then bring it to the mainstream again. So, and I want people to understand the pain, the blood, sweat, and literal blood, sweat, and tears that go into it, which is why I'm like asking you about the editing and I'm asking you about the archiving and all of that, because people don't understand that part.
I've been trying to dissuade young people from getting into documentary
For
filmmaking.
God's sakes. We're here trying so hard.
It's a Herculean undertaking. My last film took 14 years to make. By the time I was done, I had serious carpal tunnel syndrome. God knows what I did to my C3 and C4 and C5 and whatever else they're called. Even now, I mean, I'm much older now. The sleep deprivation sort of really stacks up.
Yeah.
It's an insane amount of work. Also, there's sort of ebbs and
important
flows.
work.
It's important work. No, I know. I mean, when she tried to goad me to come on board as a producer, I was reluctant. I was reluctant because I'm aware of what it takes.
Yeah.
And what it takes is this insane commitment. We rely on funding from affluent Pakistanis in North America, right? And now the US elections have sucked away a lot of money that was promised to us.
Both time zones. We work Pakistan time, we work Eastern time. We're
Right.
getting on calls at 11 p.m. If someone wants to speak to us, even midnight calls we've done.
Also, independent documentary filmmaking, you take on more work than you have money to pay.
Yeah.
Because you have to keep your edit room running, right? So then you end up paying bills from your own pocket. It's an extremely reckless thing to do.
In the hopes to be reimbursed.
To eventually be reimbursed. It's a trial by fire. It's a very difficult thing to do.
It's also rewarding. It is
absolutely.
rewarding.
I'm still high off of what happened in Karachi.
That's what I'm saying.
It's extremely, the endorphins buzz more than makes up for it.
As a viewer. I was there as a guest and I'm standing there and I'm watching the faces of all of these people. Yeah. Everyone's eyes were hooked on. Everyone had smiles. And then everyone broke into everyone was so happy when they saw it. And I can't even imagine what you guys felt.
The endorphins buzz that you get when a film is well received and people send messages saying we teared up is the best kind of high that exists.
That's why you do what you do.
Exactly. That's what makes it worth it. And the high, I'm still high off of our screenings and how well it was received and how moved people were. I guess you said it. That's why we do it.
So I'm going to ask a very generic question next. I know after watching that teaser, because I was privileged enough to watch it, and because I've been talking to you guys about it for the last month or so, I know what's coming. But for the people out there who have no idea what's coming, I mean, we've briefly touched upon some of the really cool stuff that's going to be in there. And I know you can't give away everything because what's the point? But what can they expect? What is it that they are going to taking away from this documentary?
I think because they're going to learn a lot of things about Khan Sahib that they didn't know before. And that's the reason why I wanted to make this documentary. I wanted to know the man behind the legend.
Right.
Because most of us have only seen him either perform live or we've seen his performances on TV. But what do we really know about him? What was his life like? What were his struggles? What about his personal life?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that people are going to get to learn. Yeah, about Khan Sahib.
So the humanity.
And I think that's important.
My last question, and this is something like obviously as a personal question as well, and because it's something that, I mean, because I can't say I'm from the same field as you, but also we all have the same kind of thoughts. We all wake up and we're like, I want to do this, I want to do that. What you guys have attempted to do or what you guys are working on and doing, it's something that has been on a lot of people's bucket lists that they would love to check off. This is something that you guys now can tick off. You ticked off before also, and now you are ticking off your bucket list. What's next? What other bucket list items do you guys have?
I think for me, it's been an incredible journey, and I've realized that I really enjoy filmmaking, and I think I would like to work on more projects after I'm done with this one. And I do have some ideas, but I think the best way to figure out whether something is meant for you or you enjoy it is just to dive in and just figure it out. And I think that's what I've done, and I've realized that I really like researching. I like interviewing people. I like talking to people and getting to know the character, and the whole process. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Okay. I'm looking forward to what's next. I mean, first I'm looking forward to the documentary and then what's going to come next. That'd be really cool.
You want me to speak to what?
Bucket list items. What else do you
happen to
have?
be working on 4 other
Because you've got the
documentaries.
awards. You've got the... Oh, you are.
I am. Which it's a terrible thing to do to oneself. But obviously, my bandwidth is most consumed by Nusrat, and obviously there's a strong attachment and connection to the project. Bucket list, I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of other projects I would love to work on, but like I said, it's just it takes so much that it has to really make you want to do it.
Right.
Obviously, Khan Saab's story is one that makes you want to give it your all. But, Arshad Nadeem. Why did I think of that?
There's so many people.
We're all Arshad
who are
Nadeem
running
without
after
javelins.
that.
We're run out of funding. So, we would love people to empty
This
their
is a
coffers.
plea.
And put your
Everyone get
monies
on
where
it.
your mouths are.
Yeah.
But Arshad Nadeem, yeah, that would be stellar. But let's just focus on this documentary at hand before.
I was going to offer you a podcast of your own. No, not Arshad Nadeem. I was going to offer you a
Zakir
podcast
will
of
be
your
brilliant.
own. I know,
He
we've
will be
discussed
brilliant.
this.
Get Arshad Nadeem.
But now, after hearing about what all you're going through, I think I'll wait a couple of years. I'll wait till all your documentaries are
By
out.
the way, I
not
started collecting
distracting.
archives on Arshad Nadeem.
You have.
Just in the eventuality that
Guys,
something might happen.
2028.
But he's been called by 14 people. Of
course.
Someone called his manager and they were told to get in line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think he merits at least 14 different documentaries and films and whatnot. And a podcast with you.
And a podcast with me. He should come.
Definitely.
He should come. I
We
mean,
should have him.
we've
You
called,
asked.
but we're also in the queue. So eventually I'll get there. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you. This is just a part. We were discussing. This is part 1. You guys will be back. We're going to talk more on this topic because this is something that, I mean, for the next year, this is all I'm going to be talking about. So thank you so much for giving me your time. Thank you so much for being here and coming into our studios.
Thank you so much for having
Thank you so
us.
much.
We had a great time with talking to you.
Great.
Best podcaster we've ever talked to.
That's right.
I'm going to use this as the promo. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, filmmakers Saina and Zakir have been working closely with Real World Records for the lost album of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, titled Chain of Light. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more in the next podcast, so stay tuned. But before that, today, we talked about their documentary that they're working on, titled Ustad. If you want to know a little bit more about the documentary, about the process behind it, about when it's coming out, because it's still going to be a while before it comes out, but we'll keep you updated. But ustadthefilm.com is where you need to go. You'll find everything there regarding the making of, regarding when it's coming out, regarding what to be excited for. So stay tuned to City FM 89 and stay tuned to this podcast because we're going to have these guys on again.